This is the Breaking Up with Binge Eating podcast, where every listen moves you one step closer to complete food freedom. Hosted by me, Georgie Fear, and my team at Confident Eaters. Welcome back to the Breaking Up with Binge Eating podcast. As always, I'm your host, Georgie Fear, and today I actually have with me a special guest. Now, on a lot of podcasts, that's not unusual, but on mine, that is pretty darn unusual because usually you're just hearing me and sometimes one of my colleagues here at Confident Eaters making the content. And it's not because I have not had requests. I receive emails probably 3 to 5 a week from people that want to be on my show, that want to take advantage of the listenership that I have, that want to usually sell their thing, but I'm very protective of my audience. Don't want people coming on to say things that I don't believe are in my listeners' best interest. And so, yes, I'm very protective of you guys. But I received a request from somebody who asked me if I would be interested in having Dr. Glenn Livingston on my show. And I was like, well, that gives me pause because I know his stuff and I know his stuff's really good. So I decided to pivot on my no guests policy. And I would like to introduce Dr. Glenn Livingston to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks. I hope you're calling me Glenn. And that's got to be the best introduction I ever had. So I want you to follow me around and introduce me at parties and stuff.
Well, I'll be like your hype man. We can get a soundtrack and
Yes, please.
it'll be great. But I really, really appreciate people that are doing good work. And I sound cynical when I say I don't think there's a lot of them in this space. But I think there's a lot of places where people who are intending to do good actually do harm.
Mhm.
And so, yeah. So you have a background in psychology or a licensed psychologist, is that right?
I am. Yeah, in New York and Florida. I'm licensed. Yeah.
And I think that probably the training for that goes a long way toward not doing things that will harm people.
Yeah. I mean, we don't take the Hippocratic oath, but definitely first do no harm. Definitely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
most people who listen to my show, they've struggled with binge eating or emotional eating or compulsive overeating or whatever we want to call it for a long time. And some of the help that they have sought has actually harmed them. Sometimes it's doctors that just are trying to put them on a weight loss program because all they see is a weight problem. And I also think your lived experience, the things that you have shared publicly about what you've gone through that have helped educate you and finding what worked for you and seeing how that helped other people is really pertinent. So can you just, for anybody that's not familiar with you, tell people a little bit of your background and how you came to where you are now in your
Oh,
expertise?
sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm not just a doctor that wanted to work with overeaters. I used to be almost 300 pounds. And, if you got to the Woodbury Country Deli after me, they were probably out of pizza and Pop-Tarts and muffins. I mean, I'm 6'4". You can't tell on the video, but I'm 6'4". I'm broad-shouldered. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying that if I worked out a couple of hours a day, I could eat whatever I wanted to when I was a kid. I mean, 6,000 calories a day was no problem. Multiple pizzas, boxes of muffins. And I thought it was great. I thought it was the best thing ever. I didn't think it was a problem until I got a little older and I was 22, 23, and I was married and I was commuting a couple of hours each way to go to school and get my degree and see patients. And then I'd come home and God forbid my wife wanted to talk to me. Um, there was just no time to work out for hours a day.
Yeah.
So I couldn't rely on what we kind of sort of call exercise bulimia. It's not a formal diagnostic category, but I couldn't get rid of the food by over exercising, and my metabolism was slowing down and I started gaining weight. Not all at once, but I wasn't really that big, but I recognized it was a problem. And having been raised in a family of psychologists and being a psychologist myself, I thought, well, the problem must be that there's a hole in my heart. If I
Right.
could heal that metaphor, right? And if I could love myself thin, then I wouldn't have to, and fill that hole in my heart, I wouldn't have to keep filling the hole in my stomach. So I went that route. And it's a very seductive route because there's a lot of personal growth that occurs when you investigate what's making you sad or angry or, the traumas that you've been through. And emotional trauma can be one of many cues in the binge eating process, but it doesn't quote unquote cause binge eating. We'll get into that later because it's
Sure.
really important. but I thought it did. And so I was trying to put out that fire for all those years. For 20 years, I went to the best therapist and I confessed all my sins and I cried and I screamed and I went to Overeaters Anonymous and I had a spiritual awakening and I became this really enlightened person who was really like a really enlightened fat guy. I just kept on eating and eating and eating.
Enlightened, but no lighter.
Enlightened, but no lighter. Um, I did love myself more. A lot of the self-hatred went away, but I love myself more as a big guy. Um,
Which is no small victory. I just want to add that in there. Like, you know, eating issues are about so much more than body weight. And I think
yeah.
for a lot of people that changed being kind to ourselves and looking after ourselves may be as big or more of a life quality improvement than whatever physical changes also come down the road. But anyway, I'll let you finish your story.
Well, no, but learning how to love yourself before you arrive is at least a third of the battle.
Yeah.
It's part of the process. Um, your life is not going to start when you get to your goal weight. And if your whole purpose in life is to get to your goal weight, then you're going to feel like you have no purpose when you get to your goal weight.
Right.
So you kind of have to have a life in the meantime. So I was also, I married a marketer
Okay.
and she traveled for business and I was home with a lot of time in my hands. We didn't have kids. I didn't commute. So I started a second business consulting for big industry, the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, mostly food on the side. And in my 20s and 30s, I was on the wrong side of the war. And I was working with these companies that were engineering these hyper palatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and excitotoxins. And,
Yeah.
it's all designed to hit the bliss point in the reptilian brain without giving you the nutrition to feel satisfied. And I saw all kinds of things going on there. And eventually it came together for me. And I realized that if this is targeted at the reptilian brain doesn't really know love. Like I am trying to love myself, but the reptilian brain
Survival, right?
sees it's just all survival. It's like eat, mate, or kill, like a bad drinking game, like a bad college drinking
Yeah.
game. And then on top of that is your mammalian brain, which says before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact does it have on the people that you love and your tribe and everything like that? And then there's the neocortex that says before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact does that have on your long-term goals, like weight loss, like your body image, like your work at the gym, but also spirituality and music and art and contribution and all your general work. And what I could say is that for those 20 years that I was getting heavier and heavier, I was really focused much more in the neocortex and a little bit the mammalian brain. Um, and so when I would have an urge, when I would be at a coffee shop and there'd be a chocolate bar in the counter and it was calling to me, and even though I said I'm not going to have chocolate during the week, it would say, "Well, you worked out hard enough; it'll be just as easy to start tomorrow. So go ahead."
Sure.
um, I would kind of think, well, oh, I must be needing love at this point. I, I must, I must be one of my early traumas is activated and I need to give myself more love. I didn't know that what I was actually doing was like giving this thing permission to do whatever it wanted to, because it waited.
Reinforcing. Yeah.
I was reinforcing that. Um, and it's true. I needed more love. It's true. There were traumas that were triggering me, but I don't even like that word trigger because it's a very passive word, you know,
I do
it's,
understand.
it's like you're not part of the process. Um, so there was that. And I eventually did a study where when the days when internet books were cheap, I had 40,000 people take a survey and they told me what they were craving and, what foods they had trouble controlling and what emotional issues they had, what was really stressing them out. And I found some interesting things. I found out that people that are craving chocolate are a bit more likely to feel lonely or brokenhearted or depressed. And I was in that category. People who were craving salty, crunching things tended to be more stressed at work. And people who were craving starchy, chewy things like pizza or bread or bagels, they tended to be stressed at home. And I was like,
Mhm.
aha, this is it. Now
Now
I've
I'm
got
onto
this week.
something.
Now I'm onto something. So I called my mom, who's also a psychotherapist, and I said, look, I'm not really thinking about talking publicly about this. I'm just trying to figure it out. Why do I go to chocolate when I feel lonely or brokenhearted? Like the marriage was kind of going bad at that point, and And I said, but I always go to chocolate. Why is that? And she gets this awful look on her face, this just horrible look. And I said, Mom, it's okay. This was 40 years ago that we're talking about. I love you. I forgive you. I just want to find out what happened. And she said, well, honey, in 1965, when you were 1 year old, because this was 20 years before today that we were really having this
Yeah.
conversation, 2021, I guess. When you were 1 year old, your dad was in the army and they were talking about sending him to Vietnam. And I was terrified because, your sister was on the way. We're trying to get pregnant. And I thought I'm going to be an army widow with two small kids. And at the same time, your grandfather, my dad, had just gotten out of prison. And I didn't know where he was for 2 years. And I was horribly depressed. And so when you would come looking for love and, wanting to play or cuddle or, just have some healthy food, I didn't have the wherewithal to do it. And I was just sitting and staring at the wall, feeling anxious and depressed. So what I did was I kept a big bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup in a refrigerator on the floor. And I say, honey, go get your Bosco. Go get your Bosco. I go running over to the Bosco and I go into a chocolate sugar coma. And my mom could resume sitting and staring at the wall. Well, okay, this sounds like a movie story. It sounds like at that moment, if this were the movies, my mom and I would have this big hug and a big cry, and then I'd never have trouble with chocolate again, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it was a great conversation to have. I don't regret it. But it actually made my chocolate eating worse.
Yeah, it doesn't get rid of the established pattern or the established, thing that you've rewarded for so long, but I bet a lot of people listening are like, "Yes, there was that time when I was young," or most of my clients tell me about memories of, like, I used to
Right,
steal sticks of butter from the fridge and go upstairs and hide in my room and eat the butter.
right, right. No, the birth of the food monster inside of you. When you suddenly realized there was an inordinate amount of pleasure available in a very small package that you could get for
Yeah,
yourself.
and it's the only thing you can get for yourself when you're a kid a lot of the time.
Right.
Can't move out, can't really stand your ground, or in some households, it's not even safe to communicate openly or have emotions, so a lot of times turning to food is the only option of a really young child.
And so, yes, that was the spark that lit the fire. Um, but not only does it establish the pattern, it actually made it worse in some ways because there was this voice of justification inside me that said, you know what, Glenn? You're right. Our mama didn't love us enough. And she left a great big chocolate sized hole in your heart. And until you can figure out how to fill that or fix the marriage or find love, you're going to have to just keep filling it up with chocolate. Yippee, let's go get more. And now I had this great excuse. I
Yeah,
really am wounded. I really deserve chocolate. That was bad news.
totally,
That was,
yeah.
that was bad news for me.
Yes, those justifications. It's amazing how creative our brains can get when they're trying to convince us that it's okay to do something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I always remember a client who was convinced himself that it was okay to substitute an equal amount of cake for fish. And he said, well, it's because cake is like fish.
It's 100 shades of gray in the middle, and it's
It-
like, yeah, chocolate comes from a bean, which comes from a tree, therefore it's a plant. They're breaking up chocolate instead of the vegetables my dietitian told me to eat.
Exactly.
Might as well
Exactly.
be eating salad. So,
Anyway, so
yeah, so that cognitive approach, was that where you, first
that's
started
where I started
working
to
on
get better.
things?
That's where I started to get better. So I this was very private. I was not going to share this publicly. I wish I used another word for it when I started to share publicly, but I called it my inner pig.
Okay.
It was not a food monster. I wish I called it a food monster. It works just as well to call it a food monster. But
But
this
now
was
we're
just
calling it the food monster.
I try to.
Yeah.
I try to. I I have 2 million listeners who or 2 million readers who are used to calling it the pig. So people call it the pig all over the internet. But anyway, that's another story.
It's the curse of authorship that as soon as you put something to write, like in writing, you realize,
It's a
like,
life of its own.
I really wish I had worded that differently, and now I can't unwrite it.
Right. Right. And if you worry about every little thing that you publish, then you never publish anything. So
Right.
it's
So
you got
better
to
to
keep going.
publish and regret.
Anyway, so what I did was I said, okay, this thing, this reptilian brain, I'm going to have to figure out when this is awake. This is not a love yourself thin thing. I'm going to have to take control of this thing. So how do I know when this thing is waking up and taking control? And I said, well, I'm going to have really clear lines so that I can identify the thoughts that suggest that I cross them. So one of my first lines was that I will never have chocolate on the week, only on the weekends and no more than 2 ounces at a time. Um, and I think at one point it was only after a workout also. And that way, if I was in a coffee shop and I heard that little voice in my head that says you worked out hard enough, it'll be just as easy to start your diet tomorrow. A little bit's not going to hurt you. I could say, wait a minute, that's not me. This is always so embarrassing when I tell this the first time. That's not me. That's my inner pig. Chocolate on a weekday is pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. That's what started to work for me.
Yeah.
I'm a
Well,
sophisticated go on.
I was just thinking if I can interrupt you for one moment there. Where you started is so far ahead of where most people start because you had the presence of mind to know that I don't wanna be completely black or white about this, and it's not realistic to say, "Okay, I'm just never eating chocolate again," because how many times do we hear that from people? They have repeated, loss of control experiences with any particular food, and they're like, "That's it, no more chocolate, the only answer is abstinence." And you said you went to OA, so I'm sure you've had some experience with attempting abstinence. And I really like that you said, maybe what's gonna work for me here is just to have some guardrails in place to keep me out of the ditch, like some definitions with contingencies.
And I find 2 out of 3 people can do that. And what really facilitates that is the guardrails. It's grounding it within a certain context. When we talk a little bit later about cravings and how you extinguish them, we can talk about how if you set up a slot machine that only paid off at 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings, the casino would empty out during the week
Yeah.
because your brain would recognize that the reward is only available at a particular time in a particular place. It's only when you don't know when it's going to pay off that you get stuck at the slot machine pulling it all the time, all the time, all the time. That having been said, I think there are some situations where that neurological groove is driven so deep that there's some foods you just can't do. I think people make mistakes almost no matter what. So I don't want to give people the impression that they should expect to be perfect, but I do believe that it's necessary to aim with perfection at a very well-defined target. So when an archer is aiming at the bullseye, they're not thinking maybe I'll hit it, maybe I won't. I'm just going to try to come close. All of their energy is focused on the bullseye, so they're not drained by doubt and distraction and uncertainty. Um, I'll talk about that a little more when we get to the cravings, if that's okay.
Sure, sure, yeah. Before we get to the cravings, I'm thinking, so you mentioned you set up this system for yourself. And so
Yeah.
to continue the story, did that system work for you? Did you end up adjusting it or adding to it?
Slowly, slowly it did. Yeah. It wasn't a miracle right away. What was a miracle is that the mystery disappeared. I no
Mm.
longer felt like, in OA, I've been told that there's a chronic, mysterious, progressive disease inside of me and nobody understands it, but it's going to get worse and worse. And it's doing push-ups in the closet. And that never really made sense to me. I couldn't find evidence of it. I looked in the scientific literature. I couldn't find evidence of it. Um, there are a couple of little studies that people reference about brain changes, but it seemed to me that that was just illustrative of learning, not necessarily a
Mm.
disease process. Because you couldn't identify the disease in a corpse. You could identify the results of the overeating, but you couldn't identify the disease. There was no microbe or pathogen or, you know, pathological change that occurred. So that's another story.
Yeah.
Remind me what the question was. Did it work for me immediately?
Yeah, I'm
It,
curious
it
how
did.
your methods developed.
So what happened immediately was I had some extra microseconds at the moment of impulse to make a different choice. That's what happened
Yeah.
immediately. Sometimes I did, and sometimes I didn't. It cleared away a lot of confusion. Um, I found that there were literally dozens of justifications that my pig would use. Your parents were fat. You're doomed. You might as well. Well, no. About half the variance in overeating in obesity is caused by genetics. The other half is diet and lifestyle. And if I was dealt a bad deck of cards, it doesn't follow that I should just eat as badly as possible. If I'm dealt a bad deck of cards, it's like if you're born poor, you can still ascend.
Yeah, your
If
future's
you
not written.
right, you don't have a silver spoon in your mouth, but you can still make it happen. Um, and so I had all these things that my pig was saying that I had to disempower. Had to. And what that did is it took away my excuses and it gave me a sense of cognitive dissonance or just mental discomfort when I would go to overeat because um, being a man of my word is really important to me. And I'm a rules based person, and I'm really, I was raised in a neurotic Jewish family, so I feel guilty if I'm doing the wrong thing. And so what happened is I just started feeling like I was doing the wrong thing and I didn't have an excuse for it. And for me, it took 8 years to really lose the weight and stabilize. And in retrospect, it wasn't just the cognitive fixes. It wasn't just fixing my thinking, but I actually was learning to eat healthier. I'd make myself a kale banana smoothie instead of a chocolate bar. And, I would have some brown rice with avocado and a little sea salt if I wanted pizza, or like I would have all these substitutes. Um, but it wasn't until I published the book when I got divorced, I took that journal and I basically published the book of all my excuses and why they were wrong.
Nice.
Me versus my inner pig. That got really popular. We were flooded with clients, and we saw over 2,000 people over 10 years. And I learned that like I'm a little bit unusual in the extent to which I have to rationally justify everything. Most people reach a point where they say, "Oh, what the heck? Screw it, just do it. I just really want to."
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I,
100%. I
and,
but I think the people that we work with are also unique in their own ways. Like, some of them come from, like, very far logical, like, I can tell you the engineer after, like, halfway through the assessment. I'm like, "This person's an engineer." The people that are, like, just ruthlessly logical, and that's how their brain operates, and it's, neither a flaw nor a, malfunction. It's just the angle that they come from, and then other people who have, just very the logical approach doesn't work as well, and so we end up going more into the emotional sides and those things, but yeah, so
but no matter how logical a person you are, the way that the brain is wired, if your lower brain perceives there to be an emergency, it will override the upper brain. Like if a tiger is chasing you, you're not going to be contemplating your navel. It's
right,
going to
yeah.
get right.
I'm not writing pros and cons when it's survival or urgency, and yeah.
And so the thing is that in our modern food environment, there are all sorts of perceived emergencies. If you're skipping meals, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're making too many decisions over the course of the day, if you're not drinking enough water, if you feel too isolated from your tribe, all of these things can be perceived as an emergency. And so at those times, the reptilian brain, the lower brain, really pressures the rational brain to get out of the way. And this is why you also get people who could be an engineer or a scientist or, even a rocket scientist in their real life and be very successful at it. But the moment there's that chocolate bar at the counter, it all goes out the window.
Totally,
Um,
yeah.
and so ultimately, what I found the solution is for most people is to have really clear tripwires so you know what's a healthy behavior and what's not. Because, like, this paraphrasing Yogi Berra, if you don't know what you're aiming for, you're probably going to hit something else.
Mhm.
So you really have to know what you're aiming for. By the way, if you have a really clear bullseye, you also know by how much and in what direction you missed. So you can use the feedback from every miss to aim a little bit better the next time. So rather than rather than saying progress not perfection as a general philosophy, what I say is that progress not perfection is the right philosophy when you're analyzing your mistakes. You're only human. You were aiming at a target. You missed. Um, what's the best you can do? How do you be kind to yourself? I had 5 cupcakes instead of 15. How did I stop? I ate a whole pizza, but I didn't eat the box. How come? I'm only half kidding with this kind of thing. There's an energy in perfectionism that we want to harness because when you talk to professional athletes, they're not thinking maybe they'll make it, maybe they won't. But they're also not talking about what an idiot they are every time they make a mistake. They
Mhm.
take it in stride and they harness the natural trial and error learning mechanism that's in the brain with the minimum of interference. What I've discovered over the years is that self-hatred, that, oh my God, you're pathetic, you can't resist anything, you're going to do this the rest of your life, You might as well just be a happy fat person. I've discovered that that energy is designed to get you to binge more. That's you
Mhm.
could think of it like your pig trying to make you feel too weak to resist the next binge. Um, s-
Yeah, I call that, like, the sort of futility category of sabotaging thoughts. So, everybody has their own thing that they call their cognitive distortions or, their automatic negative thoughts, and I tend to call them sabotaging thoughts, but the things that your, food monster, whatever you call it, would use to try and convince you that this behavior that goes against your stated goals is actually a good idea in this instance.
right,
And,
right.
one of the studies that I did was to collect lots of data from people on what their justifications were, and I was like, "What's your excuse? All of your excuses that you've ever used to overeat, eat unhealthfully," skipping workouts was a separate one, but same vein, and they do fall into really interesting categories, and the futility one just feeds right on the back of, "I'm never gonna succeed anyway." It's a type of fortune telling. "There's no point doing this. My mom's fat, my sister's fat, I'm gonna be fat too. I might as well just order another pizza." So,
I
yeah,
would love to hear you talk about all of those someday. I'd like to have you on my podcast and hear you talk
I'd
about
be
all of
happy
that.
to, happy
Okay.
to. Um, so yeah, I can understand, and I do think it's massively helpful to just have some self-awareness to be like, "What am I telling myself? What am I" and I think probably your all the work you did in therapy really helped you see, "Okay, hating
Mhm.
myself isn't working, it's actually part of this problem,
Right.
and I can change these thoughts, I can tell myself a different story." If I call something pig slop, I'm, like, actually sort of conditioning an aversive frame to it.
That's the idea.
Yeah, I tell
Yeah.
people, when they're let's say there's a break room at work where they have glass jars of, like, trail mix and granola and all these other, like, high calorie, very tempting things. It's a perfect setup, like, high calorie foods for free, in, like, ad libitum portions and no supervision. It's, like, a really troublesome circumstance for people. I say, "Okay, I need you to imagine your grossest coworker goes to the bathroom, does not wash their hands, and just goes all in there." That's all in there. We have to put some sort of aversive imagery with
Yeah, I totally agree. There was a lady I knew who worked in a bakery and she was very successful avoiding sugar and flour.
yeah.
And I said, "How in the world do you do that?" And she said, "Oh, because I said, you have to not only be around this all day, but you have to make it seem sexy. You got to sell it, got to make it, you got to be talking about it. How do you avoid it?" She says, "Oh, that's easy. I just look at it and I say, that is not my food.
Mhm.
That is not my food. It's just like furniture to me."
Yeah.
And it's like she's drawn a line between herself and particular types of food, and she's able to abstain because of that.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. So, what other ways have you found that and I'm thinking we could talk about this 2 different ways. One, we could talk about when people have cravings, how to manage them, or we could sort of stay upstream and how do you decrease the amount of cravings that you're getting hit by?
Mhm. You know, um, so there's this Roman philosopher, Publius Cyrus. I think I wrote to you about him. And he said that rivers are easier to cross upstream at their
Yes,
source.
I agree.
But when they're a trickling stream as opposed to a roaring river, they're much easier to cross. I often think that the way that I recovered was like hopping rocks when the river was roaring down the stream. And I developed that skill. I got injured a lot along the way. And it's a great skill to have because inevitably you forget to cross upstream sometimes, but it's much easier to fix the problem before it starts.
Sure.
Um, what that looks like is having systems in place to be sure that you're nowhere without food. You know, when I go to my yoga studio to do my power vinyasa workout in the morning, I take a baked sweet potato with me, and it's kind of silly, but you know what? The first thing I do when I get back in the car is I have my sweet potato. I don't want to have to drive the 15 minutes home feeling so hungry for my workout. I know that there's a critical period after you work out when your muscles need to be refueled. I don't want that to translate into uncomfortable cravings. If they did translate, would I, go have 6 chocolate bars? No. But I don't want to deal with that discomfort.
Totally.
And and so you can look at the places in your life where you tend to become dysregulated when you're out of the house without enough food. What about when you go to a restaurant? Do you always have some nuts or seeds in your purse so that if they don't have something healthy enough for you to have in your food plan, that you can throw them in the salad and have enough calories. Some people, depending upon their dietary philosophy, and I work with all different dietary philosophies. I'm plant-based, but a lot of carnivores come to work with me. They might have some jerky with them, or they might have an apple in the car. So set up systems so that don't get caught. Um, you don't get caught being really hungry. For the first 4 to 6 months, I find it's much better not to do intermittent fasting. I believe in the physical benefits of intermittent fasting, but I find that people who are really stuck in binge eating don't do well with it.
You're more gracious than I. I have, like, a
Oh,
hard no.
oh, really?
Yeah, yep, I feel
Okay.
like, there's just it's very difficult to and again, like, the client goal being the most important thing, not Georgie's goals. But if people want to learn to stop binge eating and be able to eat in accordance with their hunger and satiety cues, like, I don't feel like it's fair to say I'm going to deny and ignore my hunger cues, but I wanna get really good at obeying my satisfaction cues.
Right.
I feel like
Y-
these are 2 sides of the same coin, and the interoceptive awareness and responsiveness is going to go up or go down in tandem. And many people who binge eat tell me how great they are at ignoring their hunger cues. I can go all day long, but then I eat way past full, past pain,
Right.
past satiety, and so I'm like, "Yeah, I kinda like the idea of, uh, honoring and responding to both of those body signals as legitimate." And
That's a
then
brilliant
sorry.
way to say it. No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to appreciate you for what you're saying. It's a brilliant way to say
Oh,
it.
thanks. And sometimes it's a matter of like, yes, that would be nice, but what are the costs of doing it? And so like for people who have disordered eating, I just feel like, figure competitions and intermittent fasting are just probably things that aren't in your best interest. So for
Mhm,
somebody who has
mhm.
an alcohol use disorder, like, do you really need to pursue a career as a bartender? Like, it's just probably not in your best interest.
Right. 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 It's fascinating how we come to the same conclusions working with so many people. If I had my druthers, nobody would ever fast. Anybody that's had a binge eating problem, they would never fast.
Yeah.
I've had people that are able to work it out, but I I do find that nobody really works it out immediately. Like you need 4 to 6 months of flooding your body with regular nutrition, and if you need to lose weight at a slight caloric deficit, I always say the fastest way to lose weight is slowly.
Yeah.
As yeah, because every time somebody pushes it, I find they bounce back the other way. Um, I once interviewed Melanie Avalon from the Intermittent Fasting podcast, and she said that it made sense what I was saying because if your body is flooded with flour and sugar and like packaged products, that you're not really fat adapted. And what the fasting tries to do is get you fat adapted, and it makes it more possible for you to go for longer periods of time. And so she kind of agreed that it was better to get that stuff out of your system for 6 months first. But I don't want to play with fire. Like I don't intermittent fast. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't fast at all.
That's
Yeah.
my feeling too. I'm like, when you describe taking your sweet potato to practice and you're like, this might not be what the average person does, but for me, this is what works. This is what keeps my challenge level at it keeps the bar at a level at which I'm soaring over it and not smacking my face against it all the time. So watch me
Right.
bring my sweet potato with me to public places.
Absolutely.
I feel the same about a lot of things. Like, friends, don't be afraid to be weird if that helps your
Yeah.
recovery. Like, be weird.
I am I I'm done harming myself with food for the comfort of other people,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm just done. I remember I had a date once and we went out to it was Christmas Eve. We went out to dinner with my dad and his wife. And at the end of the dinner, she leaned over and whispered in my ear, I think you need to have the tiramisu or something so people don't feel guilty about getting something indulgent. And I was like, why?
Why is it my responsibility?
Why is that my responsibility? And if I love these people, don't they want to have an example of someone who can opt out of the social pressure? And why can't we all just get what we want? Like, I want to get
Yeah.
some blueberries. Can I eat blueberries? I don't really like terms. So why can't I just get some blueberries? So,
Yeah.
I'm done harming myself for the benefit of other
Yeah,
people.
I'm fully on board with that ethos, and yeah, I think it's a commonality among people who struggle with binge eating or emotional overeating. And the reason I use all of these words interchangeably is because I'm not super hung up on definitions. I feel like anybody whose eating is stressful to them, that's a great reason to work on it, and you deserve help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Do you eat beyond your own best judgment? And would you like to figure out how to intervene without those and potions and powders and needles?
totally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of personality traits that correlate very highly with people who struggle with food. For example, I entertained the idea for a while of going back to school and seeking licensure as a counselor because, my credentials are dietitian. And yet I have taken so many courses, read so many books, and done so much in mental health. I was like, "Kinda maybe I wanna be a therapist," but then somebody who's in that space talked to me more about the types of clients that I would be working with, and I was like, "Nope, I'm gonna stick with my overeaters and, binge eaters because you know what? They're all really nice people."
Mhm.
I don't get self-serving, arrogant people. They're all just, like, really kind people, possibly they're too accommodating of others, and, that's why they
I
develop food issues.
Yeah, and I think that, if you compare it to, an alcoholic or a drug addict, like, we don't have too many donuts and get behind the wheel and maim or kill somebody,
I
right?
know. Yeah.
Right? And so, it's like there's a little bit more of a conscience. I don't mean to say we're better than other people, but and certainly you can make an argument that you're slowly killing yourself for abandoning your family or whatever, but it's more of a, harm yourself versus harming other people,
Yeah.
addiction. Yeah.
People who aren't going to choose violence, people who aren't wanting to inconvenience others or harm anybody else, are the sort of people that
Yeah.
develop, food food issues. And I have a bit of a list here that I think you might find interesting.
Sure.
So, problems that I identify in people that can be causative of binge eating, and so that would be things like over restriction of food. So people who are simply not eating enough, they're dieting too hard. Is that one that you see as well?
Oh, 100%. I think that if you think about how we evolved 100,000 years ago, if food was scarce, then when it was available, we'd better hoard it. And so when you get overly restricted with your diet or food rules or, exercise, when you're teaching your brain that you live in a feast and famine environment. And the moment that you, have a little bit of indulgence, you're going to want to disinhibit and eat whatever you can.
Yeah.
Um, Consume mass quantities, as the cone heads would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've noticed is, people who are sort of prone to overproductivity and just not resting. Sometimes it seems that food has become the rest or the break or the only
Yeah.
time I get to stop trying so hard is when I'm eating.
I once worked with a doctor, and she was running off to 7-Eleven to, get candy bars. And when we really talked about it, she said, well, she just really needs a break. And I said, well, why wouldn't you take an hour and just go take a drive? And it just hadn't occurred to her that she could just take an hour and take the drive. It's like, the candy bar was the rest.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll ask people, like, "Could you lay on the couch for 5 minutes?" And they're like, "I don't have time."
Mhm.
"Well, how much time are you spending going to get your binge food and consume your binge food?" You have 5 minutes if you're spending
Well,
half an
and
hour.
how much time are you spending recovering from the binge, sitting, sweating and bloated on the couch? That's the worst
Right.
part.
Yeah, the lost
Yeah.
productivity is far more than the actual minutes.
It's a false dichotomy, but, taking care of yourself is something that puts time into your life, not something that takes time away from your life.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's one of the lessons that a lot of people come across, realizing like, "Oh, wow, I actually don't have less to give others because I've given myself some modicum of care.
Mhm,
I actually know when this is not a zero-sum game, and I thought it was all along. I can
mhm.
actually be more generous with myself and end up with more to give to the rest of the world, and we're all better off."
Because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah. Another one that was on my list here that you brought up was the perfectionism,
Mhm.
and I like how you separated the way that we can aim high prior to an attempt or during attempt, and yet still couple that with acceptance and not blaming if we don't hit the exact bullseye.
It's commit with perfection, but forgive yourself with dignity. commit with perfection, but forgive yourself with dignity. The addictive process is just the opposite. The addictive
Mhm.
process will say, aim in a kind of wishy-washy progress, not perfection way, which really just means I'm going to try for a little while until I don't feel like it anymore. That's what it means when you're talking about
Yeah.
addiction. And then when you make a mistake, your food master will say, well, you're not perfect, so you're nothing. You obviously don't have the ability. You need to just go out and binge right now. So it's what's actually happening is your pig or your food monster is talking out of both sides of its mouth, and it's getting you to use the energy of perfectionism in the exact opposite way than you need to. And you kind of need to flip the switch and say, no, I'm going to aim with perfection, but forgive myself with dignity. You want me to aim progress, not perfection, and then torture myself when I make a mistake.
Right.
See,
Yeah.
yeah,
That is a recipe for unhappiness. I like the way you said that. So, yeah, definitely a great point. I think everybody, me included, can benefit from that one. Like, it's not dangerous to aim high. In fact, it can be the only way we achieve anything. But also recognizing, like, if like not everything is broken if you don't exactly hit the mark every single time.
right, right. Well, and that's what winners do is they aim high and then they adjust.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. So you referred earlier to some of the ways that the modern food environment and all of the hyperpalatable foods and hyper-processed things, whether exaggerated tastes and colors and flavors, can lead to more cravings. And I think
Mhm.
that leads a lot of people to the conclusion, well, probably less processed food is good for me. What other things do you think people can do other than managing their menu, so to speak? How else can they decrease the amount of times that they're getting gripped by this craving or urge?
Um, you need to recognize that we're essentially of two nervous systems. There's the reptilian nervous system that they also call the sympathetic nervous system. I think I'm getting this right. I'm not an MD,
It's okay.
but but that's preparing us for emergencies. That's the eat, mate, or kill thing. And then there's the parasympathetic nervous system, which tells us it's okay to rest and digest and pursue our longer term goals and connect with other people and all the things we think of as valuable as human beings. Well, when you're about to have a craving, there are usually some signals along the way. You might feel goosebumps, your heart rate might elevate a little bit, your breathing might change, your thinking and attention becomes very narrow and focused
Mhm.
on what the food might be. Those are signs that you're leaving your parasympathetic system and that the reptilian brain is getting activated. There are things you can do to deactivate it. You can do parasympathetic breathing, which is just breathing out for longer than you breathe in.
Mhm.
Like my friend Laurie Hammond calls them 7-11 breaths. Breathe in for a count of 7, breathe out for a count of 11. And I'm not doing it now because it takes a long time.
Yeah, it's hard while you're speaking as well.
But it'll calm you. It'll
Yeah.
calm you down, and very often that's all it takes, doing 3 7-11 breaths to kill the craving. It kinda depends upon the other forms of allostatic load or stress load that you have at that time. You might need to do more. Um, but when you're breathing like that, you're telling your brain, "There's no hungry tiger that's chasing me. There's no emergency. I can stay in my rational brain."
Mhm.
And then what you wanna do is ask yourself, why is my food monster telling me to break my rules? You need to start with at least one simple rule so you have something to
Yeah.
judge things against. But why is my food monster trying to get me to break the rule? And pause again, see what the food monster says. Write it down, carry a little paper and pencil with you, or put it on your smartphone. Don't try to do this in your head. There are limitations of short term memory that allow your food monster to hide. Ask your food monster, why is it doing that? Well, this is free food. I can't pass up the opportunity. You can't pass up the opportunity for free food. Um, and then take another 7-11 breath because paying attention to the food monster is excitatory for the lower brain also. And say, why is it wrong? Well, there's no such thing as free food if it makes me suffer. I'm going to pay an even bigger
Mm.
price if I suffer with it. Then take another breath and say, why would I feel like a happier or better person if I stayed on my plan? And maybe the answer is I'll be less worried about cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Maybe it's just that I'll feel in control. I feel like I'm a master of my own fate and a person of my word. Maybe it's that I know that I'll be there for my kids. I want to be a good role model for my kids. Whatever the reason is, link it to your why in some way.
Yeah.
Take another breath and then say, what do I really need? Maybe you need a healthy meal. Maybe you need to stop at a supermarket and get a bunch of blueberries. Maybe there's something bothering you about a friend that you haven't connected with or conversation that you had. Maybe you need to write that down. Um, what is it that you really need, and kind of train yourself to go through that process. Um, Keep notes, um, put your insights into writing. Eventually you might want to turn them into mantras like
Hmm.
one bite off my plan is a tragedy. Like, because my pig will say a little won't hurt. You can get away with it. You can afford it. And I will say, well, I don't want to get away with anything. I want to live an addictive free life. And one bite off plan is a tragedy because it's the difference between who's in charge, you or me. I can only ever use the present moment to be healthy. One bite is a tragedy. And you get these little mantras that stick in your head that you can
Totally.
use at the moment of impulse. So,
Yes, yeah, that mirrors my experience quite a lot. I had a
yeah.
client ask me the other day, like, "What do you do when you just hate how you look?" And I said, "My appearance is the least interesting thing about me." And that is
Oh,
just what rolls off my tongue
mhm.
because that's what I say to myself if I'm passing by a mirror and there's, like, something that doesn't look like it's the right shape. It's like, "Oh, yeah, my appearance is the least interesting thing about me." On we go.
Hey, can I borrow that if I quote you? I love
Of
that.
course.
Okay.
Just lots of those, you know, we come up with these little mantras or the things that speak to us, and then I think it makes the whole process get easier and easier over time. So that initial, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months where the effort level is the highest to do the things that we wanna do, I think it's a message of hope for people, like, yes, it does get easier, even if you have to put in some effort long term. It's really nice to know that your brain will get just as good at not listening to those urges as it got at generating them and following
Well,
through
and
on them.
it will label them as dormant if you don't reinforce them long enough, because the brain doesn't want to waste energy. The
Yeah,
brain is very, very efficient, and it's only driving you crazy with cravings because you've been reinforcing them and teaching it that, these calories are available through these cravings and bothering that it does of you. But it you can be largely craving free, not 100% craving free, but largely craving free in like 45 to 60 days. You can
yeah,
really do that. Yeah.
fantastic. And so I know you have a lot of your information at defeatyourcravings.com. Did I get that URL correct?
Yeah.
Okay, no,
Defeatyourcravings.com.
yeah, I went there, I signed up myself, I got so much stuff, I haven't even been able to go through it, but, yeah, lots of free material, which is another reason that I wanted to bring Glenn on the show is he's not in this to, like, nickel and dime you and be like, "Get my free PDF and then buy my $8,000 course." He's like he's trying to do what I'm trying to do, which is spread good information because we all need to eat. I think information about how to eat in a way that keeps us well is, like, basic human right. So, just
Yeah,
trying to
that's right.
share what we have learned through decades of suffering and trying to help other people and figure out our own weirdness. I love his angles on stuff. I think he has a lot of stuff that's refreshing and said in a different way than I say it, but, definitely check him out. I'm sure this will not be the last conversation since I don't think either he or I wanna go, but at some point we have to wrap up the hour. So,
Yeah.
thank you all for listening. Where else should people go if they want
Okay.
to
Good.
find more?
Go to defeatyourcravings.com. You'll get a free copy of the book in electronic format, Kindle, Nook, PDF.
Is that a title of the
You
book?
get Defeat Your Cravings is the title.
Is the
Like,
title of the book.
if you get it through defeatyourcravings.com, click the big blue button. You'll get the free book. You will get the recorded coaching sessions. That, first of all, the book has a lot of very practical information. We got excited and talked a lot of theory today. And you might be thinking, why does Georgie have this weird doctor who has a pig inside of him? It's actually a very compassionate process. And I recorded a bunch of full length free coaching sessions that you can listen to so you see how it works in practice, how I take people through very specific cravings so they feel more hopeful, food plan
Wonderful.
starter templates, a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that's excellent to have the where the rubber meets the road. So I'm sure people will be coming over to listen. And if you have any other questions, you can always drop me a line. I can pass it on to Dr. Glenn Livingston for you. With that, I will let you go for another week. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing some of your
Thank
findings with
you.
us.
Thank you.
And I will see you all next week. Keep taking great care of yourself.